Welcome back to Danny Rants. Today we have a bit of a not controversial guest, but a controversial situation. If you haven't lived under the rock and you lived in Melbourne, no doubt you've heard about ATET. It was a floating nightclub on the Docklands that's had more than its handful of troubles, from arson up to cancelled battles. It now sees itself closed, which, you know, had a very promising start. I've got the owner and co-founder, Jake Hughes, sitting here across from me to talk about what's been going on in this whole situation, this absolute, I'm going to call it mayhem for what it is, right? It's mayhem.
It is, yeah.
So Jake, thanks for coming down here today to tell this story.
Thanks for having me.
Before we start, I reckon we're going to go to like where you're from, because I know you traditionally didn't have a hospitality background, right? So tell us a little bit about what made you think about creating this kind of experience, and maybe even for people that don't know what ATET is, explain what ATET actually was and is still.
Yeah, so it's a floating club in Docklands, built on a barge. And it's also an event space, so we did a lot of things outside of music events, but music events was really our passion and primary focus. My background is, like I said, I've never really worked in the industry professionally. I'm an architect, but I've always been a big part of the community in Melbourne, the music community, DJ'd and ran parties, but just for fun. And the idea for Artet really was, I've always loved the day party environment, so going out to festivals. And then, having summers in Europe, going to clubs in Berlin and Amsterdam and beach clubs around the Mediterranean, where, the atmosphere is just to me is like another level. Like, I've had a fair share of good times in nightclubs, but for me, being outside, having the sunset, open air, I was like, this is something that I really, really connected with. So, I came back to Melbourne and realized we don't have anything like this on a regular basis. And I basically as a punter, I just wanted to be able to experience it regularly, so didn't exist, so we just thought, let's create it.
Run us through how that even starts, right? Like, I've actually opened nightclubs and bars before. The idea of creating a nightclub that sits on a barge, how did you even go, oh, this is a possibility? Like, what's step one to build a nightclub on a barge?
Well, it's sort of came from, it was actually in Paris. I was walking across a bridge and there was like a river barge, and they were just having a party on it. It wasn't like a proper club or anything. And that's kind of where the idea came from. And for me, it was more of sort of a way to get a waterfront space, because obviously in Australia, in Melbourne particularly, it's nearly impossible, try and get some land waterfront and open a club. It's just so much red tape to get through. And there was for us as well, but it's a little bit easier when you're on your own barge. So that's really where the idea came from. And then it was a huge process of, learning about all the the marine sort of requirements, the stability testing. So we had to engage naval architects and engineers and things like that. So that all really happened it was a good couple of years before COVID, and then COVID gave me the opportunity to just really focus on it. Yeah.
So when did the idea actually pop off and you sort of started to come up with it and start to create it?
So that idea, that moment in Paris, that was mid 2013, and then it was probably early 2017 that we were let's commit to this. So it was more than 5 years of work before we actually got it off the ground.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have an architect background, did that help a lot? Yeah,
absolutely. I was able to do pretty much everything myself. So all the design, all the permit applications. There's just so much work that I could do myself, and it definitely wouldn't have been we didn't have the money to fund that from the outset, when you don't really know what it's going to come to. So we weren't in a position to sort of sink tens of thousands of dollars into something without knowing where it's going. But
even hundreds, man, maybe.
Yeah, hundreds over time for sure. But I guess that early stage, just doing the groundwork would have been tens of thousands that may lead to nothing. So
yeah, I've had that happen. Yeah, so I had a space that I found that was heritage listed, and I went and got the plans done and went through the process. I kind of jumped the gun, and it cost me, I think it was $35,000.
Yeah.
I went to the council, and then they'd sent out a professional from heritage listing or whatever. Yeah. And there was a wall that they could prove that had been there forever. And my plans were going to knock that wall down. And then basically what happened was the capacity was 120, but if I knocked that wall down, it was 300. So I would have been able to make money. You understand how it works?
Yeah, it's not
and
feasible.
I couldn't knock the wall down. So I had to tear up $32,000 in architect fees. So little kind of side quest on that one. But
yeah. Well, that's it. It's you take a lot of risk doing these things when you don't always know the outcome. And where the regulations and things that we have in Australia make it pretty difficult, as you would know from your experience as well. there's a lot of pitfalls and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So
9 times out of 10, that's actually what stops it. Like if someone has an idea, even I remember early days when this idea was going on, I'm like, can this actually happen? But 9 times out of 10, that's what it is. It's the council regulation. It's the actual, like the red tape is the term you used before, but it is like in Australia, we're very strict, especially around water.
Yeah.
And then even when you do an event, you have to fence it off. You can't actually be near it. Like there's so many like safety precautions that we have here that you don't have in Europe, you don't have in Asia. I'm not sure about America, but definitely not Asia and Europe. And that's why you see these like really forward thinking, cool event spaces that you guys try to build here.
Yeah, yeah.
So naval architect, this is sort of random, but like what is a naval architect?
Yeah, so naval architects essentially they design boats and they'll do all the stability testing and all the safety requirements that, to make sure a vessel is safe. So they'll have to do all the weight calculations, they model the hull and everything, and then they've got to test, like in our case, 550 people on board. Like if they all run to one side, if they see a dolphin or something, like make sure that the thing doesn't tip over. So there's a process we had to go through. We were lucky to have an awesome naval architect that down in Gippsland, where I'm from. So he worked with us for years actually. Where
are you from in Gippsland?
Paynesville. So grew up on the water. So it's kind of I don't know if that was a bit of a like natural thing to be drawn towards doing a venue on the water, but.
Well, as soon as you said Gippsland and you were talking about naval architects and Artet, I was like, I bet he's from Paynesville. That's sort of like a floating city.
Yeah. Well, we grew up on boats and that was my childhood. So we were out on the water every weekend. So I don't know if there's maybe some sort of like little subconscious inclination towards being on the water, but led to this.
So going through when you're building it, right? So you've gone through the permits. It's taken years and years, as you said, like 5 years. You've got to a position where it's been approved, right? So council's come and they've said, what was the support from them in the beginning when you sort of went to them originally with the idea?
Yeah, well, they were our biggest fans. Like they couldn't have been more supportive of it. We went to them with the concept and they loved it, and it was pretty much all the way through. They had our backs and were completely on board. Like obviously Docklands has struggled for activation since day one, really. Still struggling now. And council have been pretty actively trying to get some life and energy around the place and failing. So I think they recognised that what we were doing would be a bit of a turning point for Docklands. And so they supported it until they didn't.
Crazy. So when you built this thing, right, when you built the barge that the club goes on, and I guess it's kind of interesting because you're an architect, so you can really get into depth in it. But did you buy it like that, or did you actually build it from hand? Like, how was the process of actually creating this space? Yeah,
so the initial concept, we were going to build something from scratch, and we worked on that for 3 years. Didn't have the money to do it, so we were like trying to come up with ways of funding it. Trying to find partners, and it just wasn't happening. Like we needed a huge amount of money. And then I started looking at whether we could lease a barge and do something like a pop-up just to sort of like as a stepping stone. And we came across this barge that was for sale. So it's an old construction barge that the Alma Pal, which is this old wooden ship, was being restored on. So the barge was actually built for this ship and the ship sat on it for like 8 years or something. And then they were the ship was ready to be put back in the water and they didn't need the barge anymore. So we kind of worked out that they needed the barge for a little bit longer. We needed time to do our planning and get all the permits and design and everything. So kind of worked out a deal where they would have it for another like 18 months and we'd do all the planning and then we'd take it over and then we'd design the venue to suit the barge really. So it was all, we already had the basic design done for what we were going to build from scratch, and then we just kind of like tweaked it to fit that barge.
If I'm in the market for a barge, how do you even find a barge to buy?
Google.
Literally.
just buy commercial barge on Google, and it's really on just like commercial boat sales websites. There's stuff around. Most of it's from the like I guess the sort of marine construction industry and gas and oil industry. There's actually not many of them around in Melbourne because we don't really have a lot of that sort of industry here. So ours was a pretty unique buy, like having an old ship being restored. It's like sort of a one-off, yeah.
So another one before we get into other things, I'm just naturally an interested person in weird things. So when you have a barge on the water and it's floating, right, obviously it's not space, it's occupied, so no one really owns it. How does that work? Like is there a rent process but who are you paying rent to?
Yeah, so we have a mooring fee with the City of Melbourne, and that was the license. have a Crown land license for the mooring, essentially, the berth. And yeah, we pay a license fee to the city of Melbourne every quarter.
Because Arbury Float and there's Ponyfish and there's a couple other ones. Maybe Ponyfish is actually not a barge, but it's something that's been relatively new to Melbourne. Like in the Yarra currently, there's more kind of popping up. Or there was zero, now there's some. Was it the same sort of metric for you guys, or is there a difference between the ones in the Yarra and the ones in Docklands?
Well, I guess ours is different in that we're doing music events. So and we're really doing music events with quite a high level of production. So the ones in the Yarra are a little bit more of like a bar restaurant. They still have music, but it's more sort of background music. So in that sense, we're a different business model. But yeah, I guess you can always draw the comparison that we're both on a barge and both floating. But I just think it's a really awesome way to sort of activate the waterways. And I think in Melbourne, we've got this kind of culture of turning our back on the water. Like we don't embrace the waterways that we have. And once you actually get down there, like you go down, like we'd never really spent any time in Docklands. And once we got down there when we were planning the project, we were like, this is unreal. Like the views you get, sunsets you get across the water, the views of the city skyline, and nothing happens there. No one goes there. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is wild. Hey, yeah. You go there on a Saturday night, there's like not even anyone walking around.
Yeah, you can hear a pin drop. So yeah, I mean, we thought it was a really exciting opportunity for us to start sort of a fresh wave of energy around the place. And we were really hoping that there'd be more things pop up on the water and, more venues, more activity, more businesses, and particularly getting the creative community down there. I think that's usually what starts an area having a vibe. It's like you get creative people down there and it becomes interesting and people want to go there. And it's you see it happen like, St Kilda back in the 70s, and then North Side, all the creatives moved there because it was cheap, and all of a sudden everyone wants to go there. And
Windsor, another example right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we thought like what we were doing, a lot of the creative community were coming down and engaging with Docklands a lot of the time for the first time. And I think it would have been exciting to see how that would have flowed on in time.
You would have been the first people to do the opposite of gentrification.
Yeah, pretty much.
You would have put a heartbeat in a gentrified area.
Yeah, we're moving into like corporate heartlands and bringing a little bit of colour and creativity in there, which was nice. But yeah. So
the space that you originally had, from my understanding, was not the space that you ended up getting, right? So can you explain to me how that all kind of transpired and how, I guess, in the first place you got given the space, or did you pick it, or was it something that council gave you? Like, how did that go about?
Yeah, so we put all our planning into a location. It was actually like 250 metres further away from apartments, and it was right down the end of the wharf, almost under the Balti Bridge. And our first like sort of formal communications with council, this is back in like April 2020, we sent them a pretty long document saying, pretty much outlining the concept, this is what we want to do, and this is the location we want to be at. And there was a fair bit of information in there explaining that it was, mainly because of avoiding noise issues. Like we're further from apartments, we can face the sound system out towards the docks. It's going to be, really help sort of maintain residential amenity. And we'd even had, spoken to acoustic consultants who had a look at the area and given advice that in this location, with everything set up right, that this was a viable thing. And then we proceeded, council supported it. We spoke to Council and Development Victoria. We had regular meetings with them, pre-application meetings. Everything was sort of ticked off, and they said, yep, you're ready to go and put in an application for a planning permit. So we went and did all the work, spent tens of thousands of dollars doing all the consultant reports. Got about, over a year down the track, 18 months down the track, and we were almost had our planning permit approved. We had our liquor license approved. We'd bought the barge. We got to the weekend that we were ready to move it into place, and it was all sort of like, council like, yep, you can move it there when you take possession on the weekend. And then they turn around and said, oh, actually, there's no moorings there. So mooring, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically the structure to tie a boat up to. So we were just like, what? Like, what do you mean there's no moorings there? Like it has a berth number, it's VH01. We've done over a year of planning for this site, and suddenly there's no moorings there. So basically it was on us to say, okay, we've got to go and do some engineering and design and build, install some mooring points that we can tie this thing up to. So we're just like, okay, it's a, bit of a pain, but we'll just do what has to be done. So then we started this long process of trying to design these moorings. And we've gone to Development Victoria, who actually own the wharf, and they're the sort of authority responsible for managing it. So we went to them to ask for information about the structure and, you know, any as-built drawings or information that we can take to our engineer and naval architect to design these mooring points. So they've turned around and said, we don't have any information at all, like nothing. No drawings, no condition reports. And then they kind of realised that they don't even know if that wharf is safe to be on. So then we basically get told that we're not going to be able to move the barge there until a big structural assessment is done, and then subsequent remediation works to make sure the thing's safe.
Was there a mooring there originally at some point, or never?
Yeah, there were moorings there in the past, and it still has a berth number. And we would have thought that the people managing these berths, being City of Melbourne, would know if we've said, we're putting in an application to berth there and we get 12 months down the track. I would have thought the first thing that comes up is, well, yep, that's a great location, but there's no mooring points there. So that's going to have to be considered before you proceed. But no one ever said anything. So we get to a point where we've committed over $1 million, bought a barge, got a planning permit on the verge of being approved and a liquor license approved for a site that we're not able to occupy. So we're basically hemorrhaging money at this point, tens of thousands of dollars a month. And basically it's looking like a black hole. We're going to go bankrupt here if we can't get this thing operating soon. So it went through months of back and forth with council and Development Victoria, and they basically just threw their hands up and were like, well, you work it out. Eventually we managed to get some help from someone in council who sort of was like, no, this isn't right. We need to sort this out. And we got to the point where, we were basically advised that the only solution was to amend our planning permit and liquor license and move to the location where the barge was currently, when we took possession, where it was being stored, which is where we ended up. So that's 250 metres closer to apartments.
So the liquor licensing, right? So normally, for people that don't know, it's what they call a red line. So you apply for a red line normally on a space. There's ones that move. You can get catering licenses. Festivals have to apply for them. It's a process that anywhere you buy alcohol, you have to get one. But with a berth, so how does this work? Because it floats. It doesn't. So the berthing doesn't hold the red line. It's the space or the berth does hold the red line. It's the actual barge doesn't own the red line. Is that right?
Well, it's a combination. So the liquor license would say the red line is still the plan of the venue, the barge.
But you can't just float around wherever you want. No.
It's registered to a certain location.
How's it different than a boat though? Because if you've got a red line on a boat, you can just.
Well, the difference is a boat is not supposed to serve while it's docked, or it can't operate as a fixed venue. Basically, if they did that, they would need to get a planning permit. So it's a different mechanism legally. Yeah. So we had to go through just the process that any venue on land would go through. We needed a planning permit and we needed an on-premise liquor license as opposed to a boat liquor license, which I don't know the details of that, but it's a different sort of license. So
they end up putting you into this other spot where your barge originally was, and you have to start the process again. And how long does this take?
So yeah, we probably, it's like another 6 months of amending all our planning permit and our liquor license. Liquor license was relatively easy. We just sort of put in the application, said, can we change it to this address? And went through a little process and they did it. But for the planning permit, we had to do, traffic reports, waste reports, planning reports. So again, it's tens of thousands of dollars again that we're spending, and delayed probably another 6 months.
Which is an opportunity cost. That's an opportunity cost.
Yeah, and we just copped that on the chin basically. We're like, frustrating because we felt like we were let down by not being given all the information at the time. But we just sort of thought, all right, it is what it is. Just move on. Let's just get it done and we'll get it open. And right from the start, the agreement was that this was a temporary solution. The works would be done at the end of the wharf where we were supposed to be, and we would, as soon as it was ready, we would be moved there. And then the whole time we're operating, right from a month after we launched, publicly both council and DV were saying that by mid 2023, they would, they'd relocate us back to that spot that we were supposed to be. So we kind of when we launched, it was like, okay, there's noise complaints and there's issues, but we just got to get through to mid-year and we're going to be moved, and that's going to, maybe not completely resolve it, but take away the big majority of the issue.
Yeah. And that's like going back to the sound thing, right? People don't understand this, and I don't believe they would. So I'm going to explain a little bit about it. But back say in the 90s, even the early 2000s, there was really sound issues weren't a thing. So now you talk about 2000 and maybe sort of 5, I reckon, was when they sort of started to come in. We start to see venues getting closed down because of sound issues. So it could be from reverb from bass, or it could be from actual sound. I've seen venues, for example, where, like for my own venue that I owned, we were getting complaints from 300 meters away. We were using a dB reader and we had to be at like, whatever it was, 65 decibels or whatever. And this guy was saying his windows were shaking. We didn't believe him. We went there 300 meters away. It was probably even longer. It might have been a kilometer away. And his was reading almost the same as the front doors of the nightclub. So sound kind of has a way of like, throwing its way around and causing dilemmas and issues for everybody. But there's this whole amount of like testing. You have to go through all these processes. There's guys and friends of mine that I know that have had to open up a club and then spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to change direction of the sound or build extra walls just to stop exactly what I was explaining, like sound leaking somewhere, because it's a bit of a crazy thing, sound how it moves, and like it's if you don't understand it, it's almost it's unfathomable like what it can do and the issues it can cause you. And because now beforehand, there was like people sort of accepted it. If you live near a pub, you just accepted it. Whereas now they're not the rules, right? So I'm guessing, that's a very long way of getting to where I'm going, but it's like, I'm guessing you had to go through a very, very vigorous process of laws and regulations and stipulations with the council for them to approve it for sound. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, like for us, not being from the industry, we open a venue like this and this is all a learning process for us too, right? So we don't understand how this whole thing works. And like I said, sounds very complicated.
Very complicated.
It takes very highly qualified engineers to, sort of manage the whole thing. And the crazy thing is we were basically like, our attitude was however low it has to be compliant, we'll do it. Like whatever it's, we'll play by the rules. And if we got to turn it down further, and even with like the change of location, like obviously ending up 250 meters closer to all these towers in Docklands was far from ideal. But we were just like, all right, it is what it is. If we got to turn it down more, we'll turn it down. We'll do whatever we need to do. And this is the crazy thing. Like the noise levels we operated at came about from following everything council told us to do. So in a large way, like they're basically responsible for the noise levels that we're operating at. So we first open, the first weekend, there's big noise issues. Council like, right, we need to get an acoustic consultant in to do testing and basically determine the compliant levels. And I guess one of the important things to note with this is the sound limits are not like determined at the venue. It's determined at the nearest residence or the nearest apartments. So whatever's happening to the sound between the venue and there isn't really all that relevant in terms of like, people say, okay, if we had walls, that would fix the problem. And it's like, it would, in that it would enable us to stay, to maintain higher like sound levels, and it would be, less at the apartment. But in reality, in terms of compliance, all it would mean is we can turn it up more, because the sound limit is still measured at the nearest apartment.
Yeah, correct. So for people that don't know, it's not recorded. It's like a little thing. It looks like a black ice cream on this like kind of like a graphics calculator that they use, but it's not recorded at the point of sound leaving. It's recorded at the point of like, I guess, disruption or exactly. Residency or whatever. Yeah. So if you do build walls or you build acoustic panels and there's still a leak, because there always will be some form of leak, all it means is you can turn it up in your venue. Yeah,
exactly. And so basically what they do, they measure the existing background noise level without the music. So say you go down to Docklands on a Saturday and you measure the noise level, just the ambient noise level, and then they add 5 decibels for daytime events that we were doing, like up till 11 p.m. So you can basically increase the noise by 5 decibels legally, and that's how it's set. So if we put walls around the venue and it reduces the noise by 20 decibels, it basically just means we can turn it up 20 decibels louder. It doesn't actually affect what's happening at the apartment. But I guess what it would do is it gives us the ability to basically stay under the legal noise limit. So like I said, if we enclosed it and it reduces the noise by 20 decibels, we could say, all right, we could still increase it or we could leave it at the same level we had it, and it would actually reduce it 20 decibels for the neighbors, but that would be 20 decibels under the compliant limit.
And another one to like mention on too is that people don't realize, right? So if you don't work in the industry, it's like you're sitting there going, okay, well, is sound that important? Or, you talk about turning up, turning it down. And as I said before, people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the ability to turn it up. But there's been many venues that have closed down that have been super popular. And I'll use one as an example. Can I use it? I'll say it, Penny Black. but that was a super popular space everyone used. And then sound cancel continued to make them turn it down. And it got to a point where, the dB might have been like, it was reading it wherever it was at 70, but it was so low. Like I legitimately remember grabbing the booth monitors because people were yelling at us, turn it up, and like aiming them directionally into the crowd because it kills the vibe. So people who are punters, they don't even realize why they don't want to go there.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden they go from this place they love to now they don't like it anymore. And I can almost say it's 9 times out of 10, it's two things. It's either like the floors are too high or like the actual vibe of the venue is like off, which is like I always refer to like a hospital. Yeah. Or the second thing is like it's sound, right? The sound's dull or it's not loud enough or the ambient level is too high. And then it's a sort of like a vibe dies off and you can't retain people. So it is a major thing. We talk in club world, if you can't have your dB higher than a certain level, it's actually detrimental to your venue. Yeah. So that's why we always battle with cancels and it's such an important thing. So I can imagine at that period of time when you're getting these noise complaints, that was causing some real stress for you guys.
Yeah, well, it's tough because like I think one of the big misconceptions in all of this is like we weren't never against the residents and we were always very like conscious of the issue. We always were highly motivated to fix it. And like it was super stressful for us knowing that this is going on and there's complaints happening. And I mean, the complaints really did die off a lot, but we knew that we knew it was an issue and we knew all along that like something's got to change. Like this isn't going to go on as it is forever. Like I said, we thought we were getting moved soon, but that didn't end up happening. But you're right. Like we'd have a lot of people say like, can't you just turn it down a bit? And we were like, well, if we do that, no one's going to come. Like we were already, a fair bit under what, probably you would want in a club. It was sort of just on the limit of being enough. So we were already making some pretty big concession in terms of like what we would have ideally liked.
What you need though, like it's actually what you need. It's not even like what you ideally like. It's like what you actually need.
Yeah, what you need. Like it's honestly, if we went much lower, like what I mean is we would have loved to have gone a little bit higher. We were sort of on the limit of what we need for people to still come. And if it was any lower than that, really, like we could have gone a little bit lower, and obviously in the end we offered to do that because, and the events would have suffered for it. But yeah, if you turn it down too much, no one will come. And so if you're doing music events,
especially the caliber artists and stuff you guys are doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like no internationals are going to play, but even for locals, like if punters can't feel the energy from the music and it's a music venue. You're going there to consume music and appreciate music. You've got to be able to hear it properly.
And that's why I guess this whole story gets disappointing because they know that. You're starting a club where you're going to bring international DJs. It is a one of one. Like there's nothing like this in Melbourne and they're fully supportive of it. Then they change their mind. The two things I wanted to go to beforehand, before we go into that kind of the cancel, the big part of the ATET story is when you actually built it right there, how did you actually build it? Did you build it out of the water or in the water?
Yeah, in the water. So the barge was obviously we bought an existing barge that was floating. So we just basically built everything on top in the location that it was. And it was really like a bit of a DIY project in a way. Obviously, being an architect, I could sort of manage the build and project manage it. And I had a couple of mates who were chippies, and my dad was there pretty much from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. every day. Just almost became the builders' labourers. So it was really fun, building ourselves. Pretty stressful as well. But yeah, it was all sort of on the water in Docklands there that we built it.
And the other one was how you guys funded this, right? Because you did it a very unique way. And for people that do remember it, there was a crowdfunding thing that you did that no one had done before. And it was like, I guess it was polarizing in a sense that everyone was sort of like, what's going on here? And it probably is because you did come from a different view or different world than traditional owners where we normally don't do that. It's a silent investor or whatnot. But you sort of opened it up where people could buy shares and stuff. Can you run through how you did that and why you did that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I was saying before, we had about 3 years of trying to get this thing off the ground and just sort of running into brick walls, looking at getting investors and I guess also trying to retain the creative control. Like we had a real vision of what we wanted to do with it. And it was really a passion project where creating an experience and sort of focusing on the music was our priority. Obviously, it's got to be viable, but profit was never the real motivation, or certainly not the priority. And obviously that can get complicated when you start getting investors involved and there's, different cooks in the kitchen and you sort of like lose the ability to just sort of do what you want to do. So it was actually a good friend of mine, Core, he sort of put the idea in my head about doing a crowdfunding campaign. And sort of the concept was that like if we fund this from the community, it gives us the freedom to keep doing the sort of events that we know our community will want. Like we can book the artists we know that they'll want. We could take some, make some stupid decisions financially, book DJs that, maybe cost more than what we should be paying, but we can do it because it's some of our favorite artists that we know our community will love. And it was like we just sort of, we get to retain that control and retain that freedom. So it was basically, wasn't selling equity, but it was selling memberships. So it was like $1,000 each, and it was like a lifetime membership, free entry every event, no matter who it was, how expensive the tickets were. And a free cocktail on arrival. And then, there's a bunch of other things we did, sort of like we'd do free bottomless brunches for members every now and then. And the other thing was you could get your money back at any time. So whenever if anyone ever wanted their money back, so you could basically buy a membership, rinse it for as many years as you want, and then you can get your money back. So you just just get a heap of free events and then head out if you want to. But the idea for us was also really around building the community, because like I was saying before, like my background in the scene is very grassroots, and we really wanted to maintain that ethos through everything we did, and have that community feeling that I've experienced at parties. This always makes the environment so much more special, and I think the energy is a bit different when you have that real sense of community around. So we thought by having these memberships and having people who are personally invested in the club, and then also, the fact that they get free entry and get a free cocktail, they're going to be down all the time. And I think particularly being a daytime venue that's outdoors, it's a lot more sustainable, to go regularly. It's not like a nightclub that you've got to be out till, early hours of the morning in a dark room every weekend. So we really thought like, okay, this is actually something that people can just come and hang out with their friends and listen to music, and it doesn't always have to be about, a big party. It's just a community space, really.
And like the uptake was good.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we sold about 130 memberships, and this is off, nothing more than a little animation and, a bit of a spiel about what we were going to do. So there's a lot of trust there from people and I guess there's a lot of people who probably thought this thing will never happen. So, which is understandable because it was a pretty ambitious project. But yeah, it's amazing. Like, having that when you're in the early stages of trying to do something like this, having 130 grand like that, like I said, me and my parents didn't have a heap of money behind us. Without that, the whole thing wouldn't be possible.
That's cool, man. Because I remember when you were doing it, as I said, it was very disruptive, but it was almost like, does this work? Like watching from the side. But this whole project, from the barge, the concept, the idea to the membership, it's the whole thing is forward thinking, and I guess that's probably why it sucks so much that the end ended up looking like it does currently now. Not the end, but like I guess the comma that it currently you're living with is where it's at now. So I'd love to get into that piece, right? So you're working there. And then ATET opens up. What does that look like? When it opens up, how was that experience for you guys to actually see your dream finally come true? And then run us through some of those events you did that maybe like a standout one that you remember that sort of, you hold closer to your heart.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the launch was completely surreal. Pretty hard to enjoy though, because it was obviously very stressful. Like I've never even worked in hospo. So we're suddenly running a club that's, 2 days in a row, 550 people at that's, it was just like, a million things going on at once. And I was also like couple of weeks leading up to launch, I'm living off a couple of hours sleep a night because we were just like frantically trying to get the build finished, let alone get the actual business running and everything. So pretty wild time that I wish I probably could have enjoyed it a little bit more than I did at the time, but still pretty special memories.
It's weird because you're saying it and I'm like getting jealous. I'm like, oh man, I miss doing that.
Yeah.
You're talking about how bad it is and I'm like, that's the best bit.
It's the best bit. Yeah, it is. It's like looking back at it afterwards. Yeah, absolutely. Looking back at it, it's like very, very fond memories, and I get a bit nostalgic. But then we also we basically woke up Monday morning and had all these issues. Like we got slapped with an order that we couldn't trade until we'd, sorted out these noise issues.
After 2 nights of trade. Yeah,
and look, I'll absolutely admit the first weekend, the noise would have been too loud. We didn't have the appropriate controls in place. Like I said, we were so under the pump just getting the venue finished and getting it open that so that there was definitely a mistake made that first weekend.
That's normal though. Like in saying that, when I open my venues, the same thing.
Yeah,
you just have a crack at it, see what it is, and then you deal with the fallback afterwards.
We still had, we had a sound engineer in there managing it.
It's impossible though, because another thing people probably don't know is that people soak up sound. So you got to guess to a certain level, because you don't, like if you work it out and say it's 110 dB, if you got a 550 people in the dance floor, it could drop too dramatically. And it goes back to what you were saying about like being able to turn it up or not.
Yeah.
But you can't guess that. Like you actually have to run the space, turn it up, see where the sound's leaking out and where it's affecting. Like you kind of got to fuck up first time to actually move forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess as well, like we didn't really know what needed to be done. So at that point, we hadn't done testing of the system with like an acoustic engineer going to all the nearest apartments, calibrating the system to those compliant levels. So that's what we had to do straight after that first weekend, and we did it immediately. But it's also, you know, council have a responsibility. They didn't request us to do that before we opened. So they basically went off an acoustic report that was done off acoustic modeling. So it was done on a computer. We got a permit approved on that. And like I said, like we're being guided by the authorities here. Like I don't know, I'm not an acoustic engineer. I've never run a club before. So we're doing everything in good faith, thought we're doing everything right. Obviously, like I said, first weekend, definitely mistakes were made. So we fixed it straight away. We accepted, council said, okay, you can't, basically you can only trade with background music until you've submitted an acoustic report and had it approved. We did that immediately, got it fixed. And then, we were basically, we got an acoustic consultant, came in, did the testing, said these are the compliant levels. We submitted that to council. They had their own acoustic consultant review it, ticked it all off, approved it, said, yep, this is all compliant. So we were like, happy days, you know, we're compliant. We can operate at these noise levels. And then 6 weeks in, council asked us to put a noise limiter in so that those levels physically couldn't be exceeded. And we were like, no worries. We want to be compliant. We don't care how low we have to be. We want to make sure we're playing by the rules. So we put the noise limiter in, and I can tell you it works. Like you go over the noise limit for a second, and like a second too long, and it squashes the whole sound system.
Squashing means kills the sound. So
kills the sound.
If you turn it up through a noise limiter, which most clubs have,
they'll
have a noise limiter, but when you turn it off, it basically just drops the sound level down by like a quarter or half.
Oh, it depends how high you go over it and for how long. So it'll give you a little warning, like there's a little red dot, and you've got to bring it down pretty much straight away. And if you get a second red dot, like the more you get, the more it will squash the sound and for longer. But we had times where a DJ would be, you know, we had a acoustic engineer, Matt Descends, if anyone knows him, is an absolute legend. He was on it like a hawk. Like he's one of the most professional guys in the industry. So he was on the stage constantly with his iPad, with, you know, all the sound he's managing through the system, telling the DJs, explaining the system. You can't go above this levels. You see the red dots. Some DJs just, you know, don't care, and you'd have, especially inexperienced DJs, they just sort of like get excited and go too loud. And we had it happen a few times where it would squash the sound to next to nothing for like half an hour, and pretty much club empties, everyone goes. Like it's pretty hectic. So it's like the system we had in place, we're like, this is foolproof. Like we've got this, these levels have been approved by 2 acoustic consultants, council have endorsed them. Now we've got a limiter that physically prevents us going over those levels. It's literally like, you know, from our perspective, impossible to go over the limits. So, yeah.
And so when did you start having trouble with, were you having trouble with the community outside of the council regulations? Like, is that how it sort of started?
Yeah, like there were noise complaints, and to be honest, it was difficult for us to know how bad the problem was, because there were definitely a lot of legitimate complaints and people that had genuine concerns that we were really sympathetic to. And then there was a small number of people who were just like hell-bent on getting us shut down. And to the point that we actually had noise complaints the weekend before we even launched. They preempted Artet launching, and we were delayed by a week because we weren't ready, just with the build and everything. So they'd seen the date advertised for the launch party and got on the phone to council making complaints about Artet, and we hadn't even launched yet. So there was a very small number of people who we knew were just doing everything they could to try and get us shut down. It didn't matter what we did, or so it got difficult to distinguish, like when we get complaints, is this someone who just wants to shut down, or are they having a real issue? And then we have a lot of people in Docklands who would say can barely hear it, you know, people that live very close. So it's difficult to know how bad the issue was. We completely acknowledged there was an issue, and we wanted to improve it. But from our perspective, it's like, well, there's noise limits there for a reason. We've got a permit. We're in a mixed use zone. So, you know, that's kind of should be the threshold
100%.
of what you're allowed to do.
And
anything that we're going to do to improve it is really a level of goodwill from us to say, well, we don't legally have to do any of this, but we want to try and, you know, coexist peacefully with our neighbours. So we'll go above and beyond to fix these issues, which is what we were always going to do.
Yeah. And so when there was a little bit of media attention at this point, because I remember seeing something where they were talking to a local and she was like sort of spraying the space and spraying the cancel for allowing you to be there.
Yeah.
So that was sort of previous to the next sort of part of the journey where it gets a little lot more serious. And she was obviously an older lady, not to say that all older people don't like loud music, but they probably don't.
Yep. Part of
But it was like, so there was media pressure that sort of started putting pressure on the cancel, or did that kind of, the council go away for a little bit, or they're on you the whole time? Like, how did that kind of happen?
No, to be honest, council had our back for months and months and months while we're operating. They knew, they knew what the business was. They knew there were noise complaints, but from their perspective, we were a legal operation. We had a permit. And I think that the thing to remember is Docklands is a mixed use zone, and it's a big sort of misconception. We'd get a lot of complaints from people saying, how can you be doing this in a residential zone? And we're like, it's not a residential zone. Like, the majority of Melbourne is residential zones. All the suburbs, everywhere you go is residential zones. But this is a mixed use zone. It's an events precinct on the edge of a CBD of a major city. So I think there needs to be a little bit of an acknowledgement from residents that they're choosing to live in a mixed use zone. And
well, other one too is that when it was originally built, it was sort of advertised and people were meant to buy there because it was a mixed use zone. So I was trying to encourage people who wanted to be around restaurants and be around vibrant community and, like bars and clubs and stuff. And then because it didn't really work, then they brought in all this people who wanted to live there because it was quiet. And then now those same people who like originally bought there, then now those same people are now fighting against having anything there. Like, it's been, you guys aren't the only one in Docklands. Like, they bring new things in, council's trying to bring stuff in, and then people are fighting back because it was built with the intention of being a mixed use zone, but not everybody who lives there now wants it to see it become the vibrant place that council originally anticipated it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the big issues, because it's like a lot of people have gotten used to Docklands being almost like eerily silent. Like, it's almost a bit post-apocalyptic when you're down there, and it's like, there's this massive city and all these buildings around us and there's no people. It's like, where is everyone? And I think a lot of people that have moved there like it that way, and they sort of have, kind of want to have the cake and eat it too, where it's like peaceful, quiet, waterfront home, but like a stone's throw from the CBD, which is great. But it's like, the reality is that's not what Docklands is designed to be. Like, you look at the planning scheme, it's literally designed to be an events precinct. It's designed to be full of hospitality venues, and yes, there's residential there as well, residents there as well, and there's always going to be some tension managing that. But I think there needs to be a little bit of an understanding on both sides, and like, we've got to say, okay, what can we do to improve the noise? And I think residents living there also need to be, okay, we are living in a mixed use zone. We need to accept there's going to be some noise,
definitely,
and try and find that sort of happy medium. But it can't just be this like, what happened, where it's like, all right, venue out. So then what does that mean for Docklands for the future? Like, who would open a venue in Docklands now?
No one.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And so when you were in that period, was there any sort of like moments you can tell me that you had sort of tensions with the neighbours outside of the council that were like, seemed more aggressive than just like them calling the council?
Look, there were moments at the start. A few neighbours came down and were quite angry. And look, to be fair, some of that's off the back of the first weekend, which I said was unreasonable. Like, I've got no doubt the music levels that first weekend, and that probably didn't help our cause. So yeah, there was some tension there at the start, but to be honest, like, pretty quickly got to a point where it really, we'd get the odd complaint here and there, but we'd go some weekends without having any complaints. And even council, so in a council meeting in February, council said that complaints had reduced by 75%. So, and this is the point that they're still backing us, like, this is, we've been operating for like 3 months at this point. And, even after the fire, like, council were saying, we'll do whatever we can to help them get open again as soon as possible. So it's like, they knew what the venue was, they knew what we were doing, they continued to support it. And then, it just got to the point where something changed.
So the fire, right?
Yeah.
So it's 6 months in, from my understanding, and then someone lights it up. So literally someone comes onto the venue, lights up the venue. There's a lot of speculation about why, like, it's up to you how much you want to go into that or not.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that someone did purposely light up your venue with the intention of stopping trade, right? Can you run us through, I guess, that whole situation, how it happened, as much as you can talk on, or are you willing to talk on about it? Yeah. And then second to that, I guess, the impact that it had for you and your community.
Yeah, it was a pretty surreal time again. Like, it's only 3 months after we launched. We were just getting on our feet and just sort of getting to a point where we're like, okay, things are starting to like run smoothly and getting a handle on everything. And then, one morning we wake up and got like 20 missed calls from the cops, and called them back, and it's like, barge has been set on fire, you better get down here. And yeah, it was just like, it was pretty crazy, to be honest. That first couple of days I was just in a bit of shock. And I think the second day I had a moment where I was like, I was exhausted. I've been working on this project for 5 years and so much stress. Like we built this thing not really knowing how we're going to pay for it. So every month we're like working it out as we go, and we finally get open, get a little bit of a reprieve. And then this happens. And my first thought was like, this is going to take a month, like a couple of months, at least a month to get open again. And I've got staff to pay. Like I've got wage bills, I've got debts, I've got there's expenses. And I don't know how we're going to survive this. And had a moment where I was almost just like, I'm done. Like I don't have the energy to keep doing this. And then I literally like walked out. I was in the office at the venue, and I walked out, and there's about 60 volunteers that have just rocked up, and they're all just sitting there like cleaning it up. Everyone's just busy getting to work. And that pulled me, that lifted me up. So I was almost like, pull yourself together. Like there's all these people here help like fixing your venue. Like you just like stop sooking, just get back to it. So that was a pretty special time. Like obviously going through that kind of adversity, but then seeing the community come together and really just like solidified what Artet was all about, and the whole ethos of why we started it. So pretty incredibly, it was like we were only closed for one weekend. It was still a massive hit financially, as we had 2 sold out events that weekend that we missed out on. And then obviously there was a pretty big damage bill that we had to fund while we were like going through insurance claims and everything. So really put us on our knees again for a number of months. And it took a while to sort of like pick up from that.
So can you talk about why you think it happened?
Yeah, well, look, there's been an arrest over the last sort of, I think July last year, there's an arrest, and the guy's a 32-year-old from Laylaw, so it's, out of northern suburbs. Seems pretty clear that it was a paid job. I don't think anyone from Laylaw is hearing the music and getting pissed off by it. So yeah, look, it's hard to speculate who's, obviously someone's paid him to do it. It's hard to say what the motivation would be. Obviously there's, the immediate thought is whether the noise has gotten too much for someone, but I personally find it pretty hard to believe that someone would go to those extremes, particularly given like, as much as there's a lot made about the noise, like our music events went till 11 p.m, like on a Friday, Saturday night. Like we're not keeping people up till 4 a.m. So,
and in most spaces, that's complete. That the rule is you're allowed to. Yeah, like after 11 p.m, then the sounds all change and whatever. But in most open day spaces, like there's really not a lot of regulation with sound, because you're allowed to make ambient noise or noise during the day. Like that's basically, if you're in the city or you're in a built up area, doesn't matter where you are. It's like, that's the case. That's the rule. Yeah.
Well, look, there's still noise limits. There's still, and like that's what I was saying before, there's that 5 decibels above the ambient background noise level. So yeah, there's still noise limits you got to comply to. But after 11 p.m, we had to reduce it by 13 decibels, which like might not sound like a lot to people who don't understand, but sounds exponential. So I think it's every time you add or subtract 6 decibels, it's a doubling or a halving of the sound pressure level. So you take out 13 decibels, and for a little while we tried to keep DJs going and just do it as like a wind down set, and it just didn't work, because everyone would just be like, what the hell's going on? And people are yelling out, turn it up. So in the end we were like, let's just finish it at 11, just, put on some background music and not have a DJ play.
So unfortunately the fire was the first of a bigger problem. And the next problem was a couple of months down the track, you start to have some issues with cancel. They sort of rear their head again. And then it leads into a point where you no longer are able to run or operate, right? So can you explain how that's all happened and how that's transpired, and the impact that it's had again on your community?
Yeah, so I guess after the fire, we got up and running again. Things felt like it was getting pretty smooth again, and we were like, just getting back to business. And then we got to a point where, the issue was still there. Obviously, the noise issue was still there. We knew it was there. We knew something had to change, and that's where we were just like focusing on getting to mid-year and moving the venue back to the spot it was supposed to be. It was around like sort of late April, I think council called us in to sort of discuss the issues and be like, how are we going to fix it? And we were actually like, oh, great, finally, like let's get in together, and hopefully council are going to work with us and help us to fix these issues. And the first thing was okay, first thing we brought up was, let's hurry up and get us to that spot that we're supposed to be. And then in that meeting, they turned around and said, oh, we don't support that any longer. Like they basically backflipped on a spot that we've, after 3 years of work on this location that they've supported all along. And this whole time we're operating, they're telling us, they're on the public record multiple times in council meetings saying by mid-2023, Artet's going to be moved to the end of the wharf. They've turned around and backflipped and said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And so we still, in good faith, probably stupidly, said, okay, no worries, we'll go and find another location. So we've gone around. A week later, we found another spot over the other side of the wharf, another couple of 100 meters further again. Come back to them with, we even did acoustic modeling, showed it'll be half as loud as at the nearest apartment. Like if we maintain the same sound levels without changing anything else, it'll be half as loud at the nearest apartment. So like that's completely problem solved. And at this point, we thought we got a great relationship with council. Like we're working together. We're having weekly meetings. We've found this new location.
They've green ticked you to the whole process in the beginning.
Yeah. Like everything's been fine. They've supported us all the way through. And then we're sitting in a council meeting and they announced that they're moving to terminate our license. No communication, never mentioned it to us. Like we were literally having weekly meetings with them, with the CEO. And they just, in a public forum announced that they're moving to terminate our license. So it was just like, and like honestly, my first, it was shock at the start, but it was also just like, saying to my mum and dad, like, don't worry, we haven't done anything wrong. Like this, we've got them for months and months saying we're compliant with the noise limits. Like they're on public record month after month after month saying we've done comprehensive testing. We've always found Artet to be compliant. Because
you also added acoustic and paneling, you did a whole bunch of other stuff on top of what their original modeling was, right?
Yeah, well, we were doing everything we could, but we were very much like, we're limited, like we were saying before with the noise level, it's like we're limited to how much we can turn it down, but we're compliant. So we were like, we'll make sure we're compliant. And once we move further down, then obviously we would have to be operating under compliant levels to actually have an improvement for the residents. So again, that's a level of goodwill from us. Like if we move further down, we could, theoretically just say, well, we're turning it up now because we're further away. So there was definitely a huge amount of goodwill from us, and we were operating in good faith and working with council in good faith, and we thought that was where we were at. And then when they turn around and say that we're moving to terminate their license without discussing it with us at all, without like saying, no warning that this was coming.
Is there any other situations or what's the word, precedent? Is there any other precedents where they've done this?
Look, not that I know of. I know there's a lot of venues that have had copying it. And when we got shut down, we had a lot of people reach out saying that they're going through similar things, but that's more council tightening the screws on them, putting unfair restrictions on them, bringing the noise limits down and down, like I think further than what is legally allowed, but not to the level of shutting down a compliant business. Like I haven't heard of this happening. And that's why we're really, we feel it's something that we just can't let happen, because if it's allowed to stand and set a precedent, then it's like no one's safe.
And so once they did terminate the license, like how did that go about? Like what did it look like when you guys got received it? Like how was that process?
So it was a bit of a long process from them first saying they announced, that they were moving to terminate, or basically they were considering to terminate, and it was going to go through a bit of a process. At this point, we're like, well, we've done nothing wrong. So how is this working? And then a week later, they come out with this big statement that the EPA has detected exceedances of the noise limits that we've never heard of. This is the first we'd heard of it. And like I said, we're like our history. It's like we've done everything you've told us to do to be compliant. We've had 2 acoustic consultants tick it off. You guys have endorsed the noise levels. We've got a noise limiter installed, and you've been telling us for month after month after month that we're compliant. So now suddenly you're saying we're not compliant, but there's no evidence. They were basically just secondhand information that the EPA said you're over the limits. And so we were like, well, it would be really great if you could provide us the details so we can actually assess it and work out what's gone wrong, because we don't see how we could not be compliant given everything we've done. And that went on for a couple of weeks where they were slapping us with background music demands that you can only operate with background music, but they haven't provided us any evidence or any details. So it's like there's no due process at all. So we were basically at the point where we didn't really have a choice but to follow their instructions. So we're losing tens of thousands of dollars a week. Like I'm paying staff, a huge team of staff, paying expenses, outgoings, and we're living off music events. And at background music levels, we'd have people turn up and stay for an hour and leave. And it's like we're basically closing at 7 p.m. That went on for a couple of weeks and was basically, it's like they're basically bleeding us out. Like we can't. It doesn't even matter if they what the rules are around the exceedances or whether we've done anything wrong. It's like we're just going to run out of money and go bankrupt if we keep doing this.
And another one I wanted to touch on is like, you know, when people think of a venue or they think of like a festival or they think of anything in our industry, for some unknown reason, people go, oh, these must be these rich people, right? And even with me and my platform, what I've created is I've like trying to humanize these people that are behind these giant pubs. And don't get me wrong, there's fucking plenty of billionaire pub owners. But you said earlier, you, your mum, your dad. So the people they're watching who they shut down and this happened to, it was your physical hard-earned cash that your family put into this venue that they shut down.
Yeah, I think that's, again, like you said, one of the big misconceptions. Like usually an owner of a venue like this is going to have other businesses have money behind them, where basically I was an architect, mum's a nurse, dad's a physio. Don't have huge money behind us, pretty much put our family home on the line. So yeah, when this is like our whole entire lives are basically on the line with this. And that's why it's pretty, it's pretty scary, like what the outcome could potentially be, because it
fucking pisses me off. So this is the next thing, all right, where I'm going to get into the one I said to you earlier that I was going to have a bit of a rant on. But basically, I believe that councils do not want nightclubs and they do not want live music venues in Melbourne, right? Because they don't support them. So like you go back well before your time, they originally started to do they started to build residential areas around pubs, but then they went to the pubs and said, hey, you got to turn down the music. And they did what you said. They made it so hard that they bled these venues out till they died. And in my opinion, as a music lover, these were the hearts of these communities. These are the reason why these people wanted to live there in the first place. Yeah. So they've literally ripped out the heart, right? Yeah. Gentrification is basically the term. Then second to that, they did you can't do 24-hour licenses anymore. So they stopped that. You still can't do it to this day. And then after that, they did the 2 a.m. lockout, which the only reason they lost is because everybody fought against them. Mm-hmm. So over time, they've never really supported us. They've never really tried to help us. On the contrary, you talk about every venue I know from King Street that have been there for 30 years, they're still every single year getting new regulations, new uptakes in licensing, new uptakes in fees. They're getting new sound fucking regulations or new building pops up and then they've got to change this and double glaze the windows and things are getting, and then the other one is the excise, right? The excise is going up exponentially every single year. It's cost you $16 for a fucking pint of Carlton Draft, which is unattainable. But this is the live roots of this music is that I believe there is a move to try to shut these places down. Yours is a more drastic, faster version. And I think that's why a lot of people are looking at it and going, what the actual fuck is going on here? I believe they've done this to a lot of venues, but it's been a long, slower process. Yours has been a quicker one because I don't even really know why, right? So you were talking about how it's dangerous. And I'd love you to explain to people why you believe this is, you guys are fighting so hard because you don't think it's just a you issue, it's an actual industry issue.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. And it's like I said before, when we got shut down, we had so many people reach out to us saying what they're going through, and you realize this is happening everywhere. Our whole culture and our whole scene is under threat and under attack, really. And it does usually happen silently. And I guess we're kind of lucky in a way that our venue was prominent, had a bit of a history, with the Arson attack, and there's been a fair bit of media around it with the noise complaints and everything. And also just the location is it's exposed, it's on the water, it's different. So it's given us a bit of a platform to be heard. And then it's also just how outrageous council's actions are that have given us that platform. Whereas I think a lot of venues are sort of being bled dry and just putting all these crazy restrictions on them that they just can't survive. And you're right, it's the reason people love Melbourne, what do we have over Sydney? We're known to be the music, nightlife, entertainment, culture capital. But if we don't protect it and if we don't fight for it, it is getting taken away bit by bit. And
we saw COVID, man, when they shut down the industry in COVID, we had no heart. It was a boring city to live in. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. I don't even want to live here. And people were leaving in droves other places. Now it's come back. It's the maddest place to live ever again. Yeah. But it's we lose that heart, we lose that community. And the other thing too is yes, there's negativity. I'm not going to lie. You talk sound complaints. Yes, people get drunk. Yes, there's at times fights, which are way lower. Crime rates are way lower than they used to be. There's the negative to this industry. And that's why I think we always get tarnished with a bad brush. But the positivity is that we create musicians, we create jobs. There's 25% was a figure that I got told the other day of Melburnians work in hospitality at some point. We create stories, we create culture, we create art. It's I just don't understand this old hat mentality of like, let's shut down the grassroots, because there is no fucking full Sydney Mire music bowls with massive bands if they shut down the grassroots.
Exactly.
You know, like there is no Dom Dollar, there's no Amel and the Sniffers. Like these bands don't exist without grassroots. Anyway, I'm getting worked out, it's pissing me off. So this next part of it, right? So you guys are shut down, and then there's this new news. So this is how I kind of got in contact with you guys, because I was like, I want to talk about this. But there's a new news that have just come out with a whistleblower from the council. So all the things that you thought that some people maybe thought you were paranoid about has now kind of come to the surface that it's true. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, well, it obviously hit the news last week, and we were just like, wow, like, you know, after 18 months, it's obviously been on the conscience and has had the courage to come and speak out. And for us, it's like, it's a big moment, because it definitely, like you said, really validates what we've been saying all along and kind of vindicates our side of the story. But it's also pretty outrageous, you know, to see some of the things that have been exposed, and to have someone saying that council are intentionally betting on us not being able to survive the court process, you know.
Because you're a mum and dad / you operator, right?
Exactly.
If you were some giant multi-million-dollar company, they're probably not going to do the same thing. And there's a lot of them out there that are surviving and don't have the same regulation because of that. But because you are owner-operators, they believe that they could shut you down by doing this.
Yeah, and they knew that we'd put everything on the line. They knew we'd sort of like stretched ourselves. You know, the project cost over $2 million to get off the ground. So we didn't have that money. So we've had to really like be creative about how we did it. We've got debts, we've got suppliers we owe money to, and they knew that, you know, you take away our source of income and where you turn. And like, it's honestly a miracle that we're still surviving and still fighting. Because when we first got shut down, I was like, we got about a month and we're done. Like I don't know, I never would have dreamed that we could last this long. But now the longer we go, the more sort of like steely resolve we have, and the more determined we are to take it all the way. So, but yeah, it's a pretty crazy thing with the whole system, that a council can shut down a business. Like if they have a dispute with a business, they can shut them down and take away their means to defend themselves, like take away their income. So then they basically can get away with whatever they want, because you don't have the means to fight it. So we're really advocating now to say, well, the system is broken. Like we need some reform where if a council wants to shut down a business, they should be the ones who have to go to a court or a tribunal, making an application, and, you know, the onus should be on them to prove that you've done something wrong. So they've given us a permit in the first place. So if they want to change that decision, you know, change their minds on the business, well, how about you actually prove we've done something wrong and give us a platform to defend ourselves, give us a chance for our evidence to be heard, because we've got all the evidence we need to prove that we're completely innocent, we've done nothing wrong, but we get shut down, and now we have to go through a Supreme Court legal battle that's going to take years. You know, we're already 18 months in, and we have to try and finance that with our business shut down. It's like, it's just, the system it's broken, really.
And they're sort of, I guess they're probably still hoping, obviously as the whistleblower said, that you guys are just going to go away.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's obviously, I think it's pretty clear, you know, even this whistleblower said in the Herald Sun that they can't see how council can possibly win. I think they know that. So their only hope really is that we run out of money.
So what's the next step, right? So like kind of ending this story, which is, it's a fucking crazy story. And it is, in my opinion, like, you know, I'm getting worked up, and a lot of people are in our industry, a lot of people are jumping up and down. They're really pissed off. Like our industry is really getting behind you guys and advocating for this what's going on, because I guess we've been getting slapped over and over and over again. And this one is sort of like you said, people are able to hero it, but almost everybody in Melbourne is really getting behind you guys. So what is the next step? Are you going to go to the Supreme Court case hearing? Is that the next step for this journey?
Yeah, well, look, the court case is still going. It's still going to take a long time, and we're just going to keep that fight going. But we're really doing everything we can to try and bring about a resolution sooner, because we don't want to be in court. Like, it's wasting ratepayers' money. You know, like council are paying their lawyers with ratepayers' money. We win, they're going to have to pay all our costs and pay us, you know, everything we're entitled. The longer this goes, the more it's going to cost. And it's just madness. Like, we're sitting here saying, come back and let's resolve this. Like, we've got solutions. We're open to negotiating, discussing all these different options. Like, we've offered to completely enclose the venue in acoustic glazing, you know, at our own cost. And we've got an acoustic report showing it'll make it inaudible at the nearest apartments. So we're like, how has this not been accepted? Like, it is absolute madness. And they're just refusing to speak to us. They want to drag it through court. They want to, you know, hope that we run out of money. So we just want to, like, you know, get as much attention around it as possible to hopefully just encourage council to come back and resolve it with us. Like, we don't we don't want to hold a grudge, you know. We just want to move on, put this behind us, and get a resolution here where everyone can be happy with it.
I just want to run the business that you dreamt of that made you start it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like we were providing something that was super special for Melbourne, and you know, a lot of people were excited about what we were bringing to Melbourne, something that Melbourne's never really had. That was, you know, a bit more akin to a European experience or something you might get in Asia, and it was bringing something super unique to Melbourne, and it's something that council should be supporting. You know, that should be like, and I think the thing for us is like I've always said, we acknowledge there were noise issues, but it's like, work with us. Let's fix the noise problem, and we should be able to coexist in a mixed use zone.
It can't be that hard.
Can't be that hard, yeah. And it's still just crazy to us that they're refusing to negotiate.
So the last question I asked before we wrap this up, because Aiden no doubt is hungry, has to eat. The producer, he's getting called out every episode at the moment, is why? Why do you think the council did the backflip, and why do you think they don't want to work with you?
Look, it's I can't really put an answer to that, but we definitely have to question the motivation, because if we're offering to completely resolve the noise issues and they're rejecting it, we have to, like, why? What's the motivation? And like the other thing too is, like, when we got shut down, we actually went back to them and offered to stop doing music events altogether. Like, obviously that would have broken my heart. Like, that's the reason we did this business. But we were like, just purely for survival, we were like, because we did a lot of corporate events and functions as well. So we were like, all right, we basically concede, we'll just do background music permanently, just so we can at least keep doing corporate events. And they said no, they rejected it. So like, when that happens, you have to question, like, okay, what's the real motivation here? This is not a noise issue. This is not about noise complaints, because we're offering to take away the noise entirely. So I don't know. It's just doesn't make sense. And if something doesn't make sense, it doesn't add up. You have to like wonder what's really going on.
I hope you guys win if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. I think myself and everybody in our industry is behind that, and I think you will. Even today I was having chats about the situation to guys that know about it, but giving a more informative sort of run through about it. And everyone's saying the same thing. They're like, how the fuck can you not win this thing? Like, it's almost impossible. Hopefully it doesn't get that far. Hopefully we get to see this space get heroed, because there is so much cool shit in Melbourne right now that is getting heroed. You know, Pika, Timber Yard, they're allowing permits under the Balti Bridge. Like, there's so many cool things. So hopefully this is just another awesome thing, and it's just a hurdle, man. But I just want to apologize and say, not apologize, I didn't do anything wrong, but like, say I'm sorry, you know, like, I'm sorry that this is happening to you, because as you said, it was the dream. You've gone through this process and you've created it despite all the hurdles, despite all the adversity you pushed through, and it fucking sucks to have it taken away from you for really no reason. So yeah, I guess it's, my heart goes to you, and hopefully I just can't wait to see, and hopefully people do get around this. And I guess another one is, if people do want to get around this and they want to support it, how can they? Like, well, how can they do that? Yeah, look, at the moment, just engaging with stuff that we're going to put out on social media. We're about to finally start a GoFundMe, and you know, I've never really felt comfortable doing it, because I sort of always feel like there's, I guess, more worthy causes of people donating their money to. And but I think seeing that comment that council are betting on us running out of money, it's like, we just can't let that happen. And we sort of feel like we are fighting this for everyone now. Like, as much as we're doing it for Artet and for our business and our future, it really is a lot bigger than us. And we're like, we need this to be a community coming together to fight against this together, and to make sure council are held accountable for this. Because if we don't do it, and this sets a precedent, like, I hate to think of where we'll be in 5 years, 10 years, what happens to our scene, because it's just like, really could just happen to anyone. Yeah. So yeah, look, we're going to have that GoFundMe out. Obviously, if anyone's able to help, that would be massively appreciated. And but other than that, it's really just online. You know, we just need attention around it. We need exposure. We need people to know what's happened, and hopefully put pressure on council to come back and resolve it. Because that's the thing. Like, we put the call out to council constantly. Let's come back and resolve it. Like, we don't want to be in a, we can put this behind us. We don't want to be in court, and it's pretty easy to fix. Yeah. Let's leave it there, man. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming down. I really, really appreciate it, Jake. And as I said, I'm sorry that this is happening, and hopefully my platform and the people around me can get around you too, because I think it's really, really important. Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Legend, man. Thank you. Cheers.